Have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot! Artest looking, gets it Bryant. Bryant turns, has to put it up for the buzzer. Banks it! He banks it!
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scotty Talks NBA Mondays. I am live tonight with a very special guest, my man Brock Landis. Welcome to the show. Welcome to DSM Media. As you all know, this show is presented by DSM Media. You can find us on Twitter at DSM_media. You can find me on Twitter at Scotty Drown. You can find my lovely guest here at Landis Brock on Twitter. Before we get into the NBA talk, Brock, definitely got to shout out my guys over at Manscaped. As you all know by now, DSM Media is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped just launched their fourth-generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. You heard that right, the 4.0. Join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code DSM at manscaped.com. Manscaped engineered the ultimate groin and body trimmer by focusing on intelligent functionality and an incredibly comfortable grooming experience. Their fourth generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. The upgraded trimmer includes a multi-function on and off switch that can engage a travel lock. It also gives you the ability to turn the 4000K LED spotlight on and off when needed for a more precise shave. And did I mention the wireless charging? The new wireless charging system uses electromagnetic induction, which can help battery length last longer. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code DSM at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com using the code DSM. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. Your balls will certainly thank you. With that being said, Brock, my man, welcome back to the Scotty Talks NBA show. I'm so happy to have you here. Get to pick your brain tonight as we prepare for the NBA season tomorrow night kicking off. What's going on with you, brother? Happy to have you, man.
I feel great, Scotty. Thank you. I appreciate you having me. At first, I was going to say I felt real nostalgic watching the introduction. I wanted to talk about that. I was going to say no AI clip here, but you concluded with that. Actually, what I want to talk about is Manscaped, bro. You might have sold me. I might need the tools for my family jewels, so I'm going to run up the DSM Profit and check out what Manscaped is talking about after this show. But you should start ghostwriting the pitches for Stack and Matt Barnes over on All the Smoke. They deliver a Manscaped pitch, and there's this real funny and dry. You killed it. So, Scotty, always fun to link with you, bro. Let's talk ball.
I appreciate you, bro. You always bring the energy, bro. And yeah, Manscaped. Shout out to Manscaped, man. They sent me some gear. Not gonna lie to you, it's A1. Just as far as like they mentioned the advanced skin safe technology. That stuff is real. You don't get none of those shaving bumps, none of that stuff. So that's really important for me.
You told me. You say less. That's all you had to say. I heard the 4K LED lights. That's all you had to say, bro.
Hey, Manscaped is at the top, bro. And no lie, it doesn't get talked about much, but I got their boxers. I got some T-shirts. Comfortable, man. Some of the most comfortable stuff I got. So definitely head over to manscaped.com. Use that DSM code. 20% off, free shipping. Shout out to everybody checking in. Adam, what's up? Thanks for checking in. Jason, what's up? As always, checking in. I appreciate you. Always bringing the heat. Hey, I got Brock on tonight, so we definitely bringing the heat, getting ready for the NBA season. So, Brock, let's get right into it, bro. The ball, right? We're getting into hooping. The Sixers. That's what I want to start the show off with. I know that's what I'm most excited for this season. obviously I like the NBA as a whole. I love, players individually, but when it comes down to who I'm rooting for, it's the Sixers. I'm riding or dying with the 76ers here from Philly. Let's start. Rotation. Any takeaways from the preseason that you have regarding the rotation and how you think this season's going to start out?
Now, the fatal flaw with Doc Rivers, according to a lot of people that watch the Sixers, is that he's rotation happy. He plays too many players, 10, 11 players, and that was potentially a downfall in the Washington series when the Sixers struggled and in the Atlanta series. But namely, Doc Rivers likes to play 10, 11 men. And last season, he said the Sixers were 10, 11 deep. They had 10, 11 guys that could go and ball out. That's potentially a lie because Mike Scott shot sub 30% from beyond the arc. Tony Bradley shipped away. Dwight Howard plays that center position. There was really no backup five behind Dwight Howard. No primary or secondary ball handler other than Tyrese Maxey, for that matter, given Shake's injury and his struggles. But I will say, if Doc says the Sixers are 10, 11 deep this season, he's not bluffing. They genuinely are. And in the preseason, what I enjoyed most was watching the bench, watching the second unit operate. Because, if Joel Embiid's healthy, if he's on the floor, he's one of 5, maybe 6 people in that company that if they suit up and they're on the hardwood, they'll compete with anybody. So barring any health concerns, Joel Embiid's on the floor, the Sixers will compete with anybody. You know what Tobias gives you? Maybe a little boost in offensive production if Ben's not there. Maybe that 22, 24 points a game goes to 26, 28 on good efficiency. We'll have to see what happens to the point guard position because there's really no clarity there. But what I enjoyed most about the preseason was that second unit. And I think I haven't really watched too much of any other team's bench. I think the Sixers have the strongest bench in the East. And I'm looking at it from the perspective of, well, everybody's got a definitive role. So everybody's going to play within their role. You've got a big body that can bang inside the paint, going to set screens, roll to the basket, do work in the paint. That's Andre Drummond. You have Tyrese Maxey potentially as the backup point guard if they do trade for a point or if Ben returns. And if you pair Tyrese with a player like Andre Drummond, Shake Milton with a player like Andre Drummond, that's infinite buckets because the ball handlers can get into space, and those two guys are going to go to work. But I think what's really unique about that second unit is the mixture of veteran presence and youthful hungriness, like that youthful dog. And you see that dog in Tyrese. You see it in Shake a little bit. You see it in Matisse. You see it in Isaiah Joe. And I've noticed that when Isaiah's on the floor, it looks like Cork's game has a little more juice to it because of that dog maybe or that competition aspect. So I think that mixture of veteran presence and youthful dog is a really good mixture. And I think the Sixers should be confident going to their bench because last year on some nights, that bench took a 12-point lead and extended it to 22. Yeah. Also, now there were some nights where there was a 12-point lead and the bench lost it within 2 minutes. So I think the Sixers are going to be way more confident going to the bench this season.
And so you mentioned some names in there, Isaiah Joe, Andre Drummond. Let's start with Isaiah Joe. Is there a role that you feel that he's gonna fit right in? Do you see him stealing minutes from guys like Shake Milton, like Korkmaz in that second unit? What are your thoughts on Isaiah Joe after he had a pretty stellar summer camp as well, or summer league, I should say, as well as preseason showing up?
It's great you mentioned that because I calculated Isaiah Joe's numbers after the playoffs, which includes the summer league stint. I believe it was 4 games, the preseason stint, so on and so forth, everything since the season ended. And he's been shooting 45% from beyond the arc. So as a standalone shooter, a spot-up shooter, a movement shooter, it's almost impossible to justify not playing Isaiah Joe offensively. Defensively, I would understand if Doc Rivers doesn't trust him too much. The Sixers are a stout defensive team. If they have to baptize Joe with fire and he has to go out and check KD or go check Luka, he may not see minutes. But if you can confine him to a 10, 12-minute role, I think Isaiah Joe can make a lot of great things happen. And offensively, he's looked fantastic. He's looked more than just a shooter, a movement shooter, or a spot-up shooter. That's what he's a professional at. But he's added some off-the-dribble stuff, some passing, some driving to the basket. So if the Sixers found in the second round not only a shooter but a guy that can put the ball on the floor and make things happen, that's something they've been deprived of or they've lacked, rather, in the past 4 or 5 seasons. So I think at first Isaiah Joe maybe plays 10, 12 minutes. But the thing people aren't accounting for is that Embiid misses games. He could play every game. He could play 72, 82 games. But we're going to safely assume he's going to miss, let's say, 10, 15 games, right? Yeah. In those 10, 15 games, Andre Drummond starts. That means there's more minutes elsewhere. So I think on the nights where Embiid doesn't play, Isaiah Joe will get an increased amount of minutes. on the nights that Embiid does play, you might see 10 to 12 minutes from Isaiah Joe, maybe cutting to Shake's minutes, cutting to Korkmaz's minutes. But the NBA is a marathon. It's a long season. Injuries happen. Players go through things. So if a player's cold, they're slumping. If a player gets hurt, Isaiah Joe will be the next man up. And over the course of the season, it's going to be impossible to justify not having him in the rotation.
Yeah, and just to kind of ride your coattail there, I mean, Isaiah Joe, what I've seen, you mentioned the ball handling. That's where he's been most impressive to me, handling the ball, facilitating. You talk about facilitation, that's going to be something, if Ben Simmons, depending on how this plays out, which we'll get into that in a little while here, but depending on how that plays out, that is one of the biggest, we talk about defense with Ben Simmons, but it's also creating shots. They're going to have to find somebody who can create shots in this offense for other guys. The other thing that I love about Isaiah Joe is that his range isn't just the NBA three-point line. He's a couple feet behind the three-point line, right?
It doesn't start until a couple of feet behind the three-point
exactly.
line.
So, that's a huge difference to me between somebody else that maybe just a strictly three-point shooter. You mentioned guys like Korkmaz. That range to extend out way beyond the three-point line makes him so much more valuable. Just when you're talking about guys on the floor at the same time as Joel Embiid, if Joel Embiid is ever out there with the second unit guys, that's huge because you cannot double off of Isaiah Joe from even if he's standing at the three-point line or well beyond it. So it's such a huge difference in my eyes to have somebody that can shoot from that far beyond the three-point line. The next thing I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned Mike Scott from last season.
Yeah.
They have a pretty solid guy they picked up in order to hopefully take that role in Georges Niang. Andre Drummond, you mentioned he's obviously an upgrade to Dwight Howard on the offensive end. How do you feel about both of those guys in the rotation and their addition to the Sixers?
Fantastic, because both could start. Georges Niang, maybe a little less than Andre Drummond. He'd have to be in a really unique situation for him to start, but both are starting caliber NBA players. Andre Drummond isn't too far removed from a 1,000-point, 1,000-plus rebound season. He got a $130-plus million contract just a few years ago for a reason. This guy is a bruiser. He's a big body. He's good around the basket. He sets hard screens, which is beneficial for the guards, but he's coming with that veteran presence. So Andre's still as hungry as he was when he was 20, 21 years old, but the difference is he understands his role now. He knows that I could potentially start for 15, 16 other teams, but that would mean he has to check Nikola Jokic. He has to go toe-to-toe with Embiid. He has to see Karl Anthony Towns. Instead, now he gets to back up Joel Embiid. And the thing he's reiterated throughout the offseason is that this gravedigger, Joel Embiid, is going to give defenses serious problems for 28 minutes a game, maybe less if they're killing the team. Andre Drummond is going to play 18 minutes on most nights, maybe even less, and that's the perfect role for him. Because think about it. Now Andre Drummond, first off, doesn't have to guard the Joel Embiids of the world. He's going against second unit centers, but offensively, that's a huge boost too, because instead of him having to work against Joel Embiid, now he gets to go against the Luke Cornetts and Al Horfords of the world. So I think he's going to be great for the Sixers. There will be some games where you're going to scratch your head and really hate Andre Drummond because it seems like the Sixers are committed to having him at the top of the key and kind of facilitating and running the offense from time to time. But on most nights, Andre Drummond's going to be fantastic for the Sixers. And look, you love Dwight Howard. The fan base loved Dwight Howard. That was the most productive Sixers center statistically and on the floor in the past 25-plus seasons. Andre Drummond is a better version, more athletic, younger, fresher, healthier, more skilled than Dwight Howard. So I'm expecting a fantastic season for Drummond, and at the vet minimum, he's almost guaranteed to outproduce that. Now, Niang is a really interesting signing, and I was going to bring this up when you were talking about Isaiah Joe, but I knew we got chemistry, right? So I knew you were transitioning into Niang. The brilliant thing about Niang and the Sixers' depth right now is that it's not about who starts, it's about who finishes. So on a certain night, Georges Niang could finish a basketball game for the Sixers, or Isaiah Joe, Danny Green, Korkmaz, whatever. But here's why. Regardless of if Ben Simmons is on the floor or not, you need to space the floor to optimize Joel Embiid's game. He's the best player on the Sixers. He's the most dominant player in the ball, in ball. And you understand he's taking 20, 25 shots a night, right? In order to optimize that, you space the floor. How do you do that? You put shooters around the perimeter. Now, the difference between a Furkan Korkmaz and a Mike Scott is that the defense doesn't necessarily respect that three. They might not care about it as much. They can maybe double team easier. They can feel comfortable getting there late for the closeout. You can't do that with Georges Niang because he's always in the right spot at the right time, and he is a professional catch and shooter. That's what he gets paid to do. That's how he's made a career for himself thus far. Around 40% from beyond the arc on catch and shoot threes throughout his entire career. So that's a guy you're comfortable giving the ball to out of a double team. And that's how you beat teams. You got to win the numbers advantages. And that's what happens when you double Embiid. Two guys double Embiid, that means a shooter's open. If it's not the first shooter Embiid sees, the ball swings. And what's one common theme you've seen throughout the Sixers preseason? It's the ball movement. Those Sixers are moving the rock. So I'm happy the Sixers finally got a notable, a consistent, a dependable catch-and-shoot three-point shooter in Georges Niang, and I think Andre Drummond's going to feast on backup centers and in the games he has to start throughout the entire season.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. Andre Drummond, significant upgrade, and it puts the defense, it puts the opposing team on notice when you got just a big human like that coming off the bench. But then you
he's the same size as Embiid.
It's insane. So there's no break for the defense. It's not like Embiid comes out and, we can take a break in the paint. You still got to stay on your toes against Andre Drummond as well. And then Georges Niang, there's not much more I could say. You covered it all with him. But just fundamentally sound as well, and quick release is something that he showed in the preseason as well, which was just beautiful to have that like stretch forward type of player finally on the roster here. The next thing I want to get into is expectations.
Sure.
And this is expectations across the board. So we'll get into aspirations for the playoffs, all of that. But what I really want to ask you is about Joel Embiid first, and then Tobias Harris. You mentioned Tobias Harris kind of elevating up into that 26 point per game, still keeping it efficient though. I want to know, do you think that Joel Embiid first, do you think that he has another level that he can reach this year? Which I'm going to let you know now. I believe that, there's parts of his game that, one, he can clean it up. That's obviously on the offensive end passing. I think his defensive importance is going to be emphasized given, if and when Ben is moved, whatever the case is with that. I think Joel Embiid's importance on the defensive end is going to be emphasized with this team. And then Tobias Harris, same type of thing. Do you think he can get to that 26, even above 25 points per game at an efficient rate that you saw in this previous season, which may have been his best season so far? We can start with Joel Embiid, though.
Sure. If Joel Embiid didn't have another level to tap into, he'd be a liar. Drew Hanlon would be a liar. Doc Rivers would be a liar, because they all keep alluding to this next level that Embiid can tap into. And you shake your head because you look at the season Embiid had last year, emulating KD, emulating Kobe, Dirk, the fadeaway shots, the creativity off the dribble. And it's like, how much better can this guy get? He played almost 28 minutes a game, sometimes less. His scoring production was ridiculous. Defensively, one of the best players in the NBA, but I really do think he has another level to tap into. Offensively, he doesn't really have to do too much more other than clean the passing up, the recognition out of double teams. I thought he did a great job doing that last season, but it was really magnified in the postseason. Yeah. Specifically against Atlanta in the last couple of games. Embiid accounted for, I believe, 10 turnovers in the fourth quarter of the final 2 or 3 games. So it's just recognizing double teams and getting rid of the ball quicker, because offensively, you can't really ask a guy his size to dribble too much and get to the basket, because there's wear and tear in his body that he might not be able to deal with, that a player more agile like Giannis can at that size. So offensively, I don't think Embiid has to do too much in terms of creation or dribbling. It's just recognizing double teams. And I think he's going to add a few more spots on the floor, because the thing we really can't account for right now is if Ben Simmons is going to play for the Sixers, and if he doesn't, are they trading him? If they trade him for, let's say, a package of Malcolm Brogdon and Karis LeVert, just for this conversation's sake, well, that means Joel Embiid finally gets a point guard that has the threat of both a shot and a dribble drive. That opens his game up, because if Embiid becomes now a screener on some possessions, it means he can get to his spots a little easier. Whereas with Ben, Embiid might have to dribble to the elbow. If you get a Malcolm Brogdon-esque point guard, that means Brogdon just has to kickstart the PNR. The defense collapses. You hit Embiid at the elbow. He didn't have to do anything other than screen and roll. So I think he might introduce a few more spots to his game. But offensively, the biggest thing for me is just recognizing double teams. And when they come, getting rid of the basketball, putting trust in your teammates to either hit the shot or swing the ball to the next available shot. Defensively, I think you might see a different Sixers team. It's going to be difficult because there's no 6'10 multi-positional hybrid that can really guard any position, minus the 5. So they're going to look a little different, but I have faith in Dan Burke because he's a defensive genius and he constructed the Sixers defense last year. You also have to think about this, right? Joel Embiid makes Ben's game or Ben's life easier the same way Ben makes Embiid's life easier. Think about it. Ben gets to guard guards 5 feet beyond the perimeter. It's because he's a great defensive player, but also he knows there's a 7-2 tree in the middle of the paint waiting for anybody that drives into that paint. So Embiid defensively is going to check the centers. He might struggle switching off onto the guards in the pick and roll. Teams might look to put the Sixers in that situation more often. But you really have to see what they do defensively because I don't know if Maxi's starting. I don't know if Shake's starting. I don't know if they're going to trade for a point guard. You're going to have to see how they replace Ben Simmons. I don't think Ben's going to play for the Sixers tomorrow night. So Maxey might get the nod. But it's going to be interesting to see how they match up with the heavyweight usage players, the Jason Tatums, the Doncic, the Devin Bookers. We'll have to see. That remains to be seen. For Tobias, I think Tobias can be the same Tobias he was last year. And I say that because Doc Rivers is not a Tobias whisperer. He just understands how to optimize Tobias's game. He knows where his spots on the floor are. And for Tobias, it's just getting to those spots, capitalizing on the mismatches. When you get a 4 or a 3 that can't guard you, go to work. Get to your spot. The Sixers are going to space the floor enough for Tobias to do that. He didn't really have an uncharacteristic one-on-one season. He's a grown man bucket getter. So all these buckets you see him get against these mismatches, that's Tobias's game. So can he become a 28-point-per-game scorer? Sure, if he gets more shots. But really what you need Tobias to be is a dependable 20 points every night on good efficiency. More important than that, in the fourth quarter, can you go to Tobias and can he close the game for you? He did it a little bit last season. That's what I'm most looking forward to seeing out of Tobias this season. Can he repeat that?
Yeah, and I think you hit a good point there with Tobias. You know, you don't want to force him to take shots, right? Like you don't want to overtake shots in this offense. When we're sitting here talking about moving the ball around in the offense, keeping the floor spaced, you don't want to have a bunch of hero ball out there. And Tobias Harris, you know, as efficient as he was last year, you really don't want to ask him to step out of that efficient bracket either, you know, what he's comfortable in, which seems to be right around that 20, 21 point mark. Got a question here from Adam. How do you guys think Seth Curry will do this year? So that's actually a great question because we haven't talked about Seth Curry. Matisse Thybulle's another guy I wanted to get your thoughts on coming into this season. And then, of course, Tyrese Maxey is another guy before we move on to Ben Simmons' situation. Let's start with Seth Curry. What are you expecting from Seth Curry in this offense? Do you expect an uptick? Do you expect a continuance of what we saw in the playoffs last season?
I was going to say, if he can recreate anything close to what he did in the postseason, Seth Curry is a fantastic player to have. And especially his contract, I think his AAV is around $8 million per season. So for Seth, look, it's just keeping it simple. When you get the ball, shoot the ball. Don't overthink. He's like Isaiah Joe, a deep range shooter. So if Embiid gets doubled and that rock swings to you, shoot the ball. But a lot of people would say that Seth was a product of Ben Simmons' creation, his facilitating, and him getting open shots for Seth Curry. But if you watched in the postseason, Seth was one of the highest usage player on the Sixers, and a lot of it was unassisted. A lot of it was off the dribble, cooking guys at the 1 and 2 position. So defensively, you can't ask much of Seth Curry. I don't want to call him a liability exactly, but he can't match up with guys bigger than him. Yeah. Offensively is where he has to do his dirt. And if he can give you 3-4 threes a game in unison with maybe 3-4 from Danny Green or Matisse Thybulle off of the bench, maybe it's Isaiah Joe, that's really all you need. Just firepower from beyond the arc, keep spacing the floor for Joel Embiid. And if he can recreate anything close to what he did in the postseason, he's due to outperform that $8 million AAV.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And something that I saw from Seth in that postseason was just the confidence. You mentioned it. Something that we I feel like we complained about this last year during the regular season, but guys passing up open shots. We need Seth Curry. We need Danny Green's not afraid to shoot that ball. Seth Curry, we need him to take those shots. Shake Milton, we need, once he's back from his injury, need to see him take those shots. So definitely great call outs there with Seth Curry. The next guy I want to get to, somebody that I'm extremely high on, and I may be, my expectations may be too gaudy for him this year, given that it's his second season. But it's something that you mentioned earlier, the dog mentality and just the want and the need to get better every single day, every single game. Tyrese Maxey, Where does he fit into all of this? What are your expectations for Tyrese Maxey and his development this year?
Well, he very well could be the missing piece to the puzzle. And you see Coach Cal, Chris Johnson, Doc Rivers speak so highly of Tyrese Maxey at such a young age for a reason. The dude's got the talent. And what do you need when you have the talent? The work ethic. He's got both. And because he has both and has shown such promise at such a young age, you know Tyrese is going to blossom into a star. How early will that be? That remains to be seen. I like that you mentioned you might have to temper expectations because he's playing a completely different role this season. But the thing about Tyrese is that every time Tyrese gets the ball, he's looking to attack. He's not content. He's always aggressive, always uptick, always coming with tempo, and he's got endless motor. He's always playing to win, always playing to attack. So the thing for Tyrese is his development's going to be huge for the Sixers. I'm really curious to see what the Sixers try to do with him. Do they try to restrict him to certain requirements, like we need 2 passes before a shot goes up? I know Doc said earlier this season or this preseason rather that he always told Rondo, and Tyrese trains with Rondo, so there are some ties there. When they played for Boston, if you're shooting, that's a shot Paul Pierce isn't taking. That's a shot Kevin Garnett got deprived of. That's a shot Ray Allen didn't take. So I don't want to see Tyrese Maxey be kind of put in a box and it's like you got to only run point guard and not do your thing. But ultimately, I think that could be good for Tyrese Maxey because he's at that age where Tyrese knows what his game is, but no one really knows what Tyrese Maxey is yet. You don't know if he's a combo guard, if he's a slashing 2 guard, if he can shoot the 3 ball, does he become a pick and roll point guard? But one thing Tyrese Maxey can do is attack. And that's why I think no matter what they do with Tyrese, he's going to be fine. But he's going to have a lot of responsibility this season trying to involve everybody in the offense. So you're right. You might have to tamper expectations, but his development's going to be huge for the Sixers, and he could be that missing puzzle piece.
Yeah, and something you hit there, just the comments from Doc. When I originally saw him, I thought, why is Doc even saying this to this young man?
Like, kill his confidence.
Yeah. and the thing that you want to see from Maxey, on top of everything that you mentioned, you do want to see him take some shots over the season, get comfortable shooting those 3-pointers in the NBA, get in that range under his belt. But I get it to a sense, because if you're on the floor with Tobias, if you're on the floor with Joel Embiid, you don't want to start, just diminishing their quality touches in the offense. There were several times in the offense last season where, it'll be Korkmaz taking a shot that I just hate. And, Embiid doesn't even get a touchdown in the post. That's the type of stuff that, I think they need to cut that. But ultimately, it will come down to floor spacing and moving the ball. The last rotational piece that I wanted to mention tonight with you regarding the Sixers is Matisse Thybulle. How important is the development of Matisse Thybulle's offensive game? We already know what he's capable of defensively. He made second-team All-NBA playing like 20 minutes a game. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this guy's all over the floor on defense. Yeah. What can he do on offense to make him play more playable over that 20-minute mark? Maybe hit the 25, 26-minute mark regularly throughout the season.
So to your first point, defensively, the dude's a grenade. You throw him onto the floor and he just makes things happen. It's in the passing lane. It's deflecting passes, stealing the ball, checking a guy man on man. So you really can't justify not playing Matisse Thybulle 20 minutes. The problem is he can't pass that 25-minute per game threshold because he just doesn't do too much offensively. I'm going to kind of draw parallels between Seth Curry and Matisse Thybulle. You need to keep the offensive game simple. Matisse does give you a little bit of a slashing ability, a little bit of putting the ball on the floor and taking it to the basket, but that's not his bread and butter. Offensively, Matisse is going to get a lot of shots. When you play with a guy like Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons, you're going to benefit from their gravity. Even with somebody like Shake or Tyrese Maxey, think about it. They get in the 2-man game. Matisse's defender plays help when Tyrese gets downhill in the 2-man game. That's a shot opportunity for Matisse. So Matisse gets a lot of open shots. The problem is, over the past 2 seasons, he shot 33% from beyond the arc on open shots, and that's sub-league average. On your open shots, you got to hit at least 35% of them if you want to see the floor. So I think the key for Matisse Thybulle is just making those shots. When the Sixers depend on you to hit that 3-ball in the corner, off of the 2-man game, you get a 3-ball on the wing, you need to hit those shots. And that's really it. You're not asking him to do too much. You don't need him to run the 2-man game. You don't need him to come off a screen, catch and shoot like Duncan Robinson. He just has to be in the right place at the right time and make those 3 balls. But I think the good thing about adding a player like Niang, maybe pairing him with an Isaiah Joe, is that offensively, he might have as little responsibility as he normally does. He might still be able to play 25 minutes a game defensively just in rotation because he's still surrounded by offensive players and shooters. I think it was a problem more so when he played with Ben and Dwight Howard, because it's like you can't have those three on the floor together at the same time. But if Matisse is in a lineup with, let's say, Isaiah Joe, George Niang, if they play small ball 5, let's say hypothetically, Niang's at the 5, Cork's in the lineup, Joe's in the lineup, Tyrese, like they go all offense. All Matisse is going to have to do is play defense. But the most important thing is that Matisse has to finish games. You need him on the floor to finish games against Brooklyn, against Milwaukee, because he's that defensive stopper. He can't be on the floor in those moments because he can't hit the 3 ball that the Sixers need him to hit. And I'm not talking about coming off a screen, catching and shooting, cooking up a 3. I'm talking Joel Embiid gets double teamed. He kicks to the corner. He couldn't have scripted up a better 3-point try, and Matisse misses it. That's all you need. And in the Olympics, when he played with Australia, he looked awesome from beyond the arc. He played an expanded offensive role, which maybe Doc and the Sixers coaching staff looks at, and they try to get him in more of an expanded offensive role. So he sees a couple of balls go in the basket. Okay, that helps his 3 ball out. But for Matisse, similar to Seth, keep it simple. Hit the shots that the team depends on you to hit, and you're going to play 30 minutes a game.
Yeah, and just, one last point with Matisse. I thought you hit everything right there, keeping it simple, keeping him comfortable, because that's part of keeping it simple. You don't have to do too much decision-making. If the shot isn't there, you pass it to the guy that can score. But at the end of the day, you just got to be willing to take and make those shots when you're getting them open. Otherwise, they don't need to defend you, right? And that makes Joel Embiid, Tobias, down the line, everybody's job harder. The other thing that I like that Doc mentioned was how he observed, getting Matisse out on the break. He is a guy that can finish out on the break. He does have a lot of athleticism. He's pretty quick getting up the floor as well. So it would be nice to see him in an expanded role, but obviously he has to play well enough on the offensive end, which, like you said, is just simply shooting up in that 36, 37% to keep his minutes, keep his availability on the floor. And let me check in on the comments here. So got Chile hopping in. Yang is a huge part of our team now. Yeah, taking Mike Scott's. Yeah, we hit on Yang earlier in the show, but definitely looking forward to some consistency at that stretch forward position off the bench. Just needs reps. I have a feeling he's going to win us a game or two with threes. Yeah, I mean, that's what it's going to come down to, because at the end of the day, there's probably a few games that he lost us missing open threes as well. So, that's part of the game. I heard Ben is going to speak to the media tomorrow. Have y'all heard this?
Yep.
Yes, I did hear that. We are literally about to get into the Ben Simmons discussion here. Not going to beat a dead horse. We're not going to sit here and be petty, but we will just talk about what's going on and what the potential is for this situation. Brock, what I honestly want to get from you, just because we haven't talked much about this throughout the offseason, like I said, it has felt like beating a dead horse, right? You hear about it so much in the media, so much on Twitter, to the point where it almost makes you not want to talk about it in a sense. What are your thoughts on the whole situation? How do you see this playing out? There's rumors that maybe he could play on Friday. I doubt he plays by Wednesday. He's probably not in shape in reality anyways, but let alone fitting in with the team, knowing his role, what is going on this season. How do you see this playing out this season, and what are your thoughts on the Ben Simmons situation as a whole?
So it's a very loaded question, because this has been transpiring for, I want to say, 2 years. Now, if you ask Ben's camp, they'll tell you the James Harden trade situation earlier this season was what triggered it. There's reports that it dates even further back to the Rep Round Jimmy Butler era. Here's where I'm at, right? I can defend a guy who goes out, plays hard defense, and does what Ben does. It's difficult after the playoff series he had. I'm completely fine defending a guy's game because I appreciate the little nuances in the game. What I'm not okay with is defending somebody that did what Ben did to his teammates. It's one thing if Ben's getting bad advice from his camp, which he most definitely is, and that's apparent after what happened with Ben folding and coming back to camp. Yeah. It's one thing if Ben's just getting bad advice. But if the reports are true that Ben told Embiid and Tobias, don't come out to LA and talk to me because I don't want to talk to you, after the playoff series he just had, you see Ben in the lab doing the Chris Johnson open runs where he's shooting the 3 balls and the fadeaways and posting I'm ready and the smoke out the nose emojis, and yet he disappeared for a 7-game series against Atlanta. That's what infuriates me. So if you're going to do what you do and move the way you move, that's one thing. If you're going to do this to your teammates, that's a whole nother thing. And when Embiid said it's borderline disrespectful, it wasn't borderline. It was disrespectful. For me, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. So Ben ultimately folded because I think his management, his agency, whoever it may be, misjudged the situation. I don't even know if that's possible because of how many lawyers they have behind them and the whole legal stuff. So I don't know how it's possible they miscalculated how much money they were missing out on. But right now, I really don't know what to assume. I don't think there's a safe assumption. So when you ask, does Ben return? Does Ben play? Hell if I know. Yeah. Hell if you know. Hell if Doc Rivers knows. Doc Rivers knows apparently, because it doesn't sound like he knows either. But from what I've collected, Ben's at camp right now. The pictures that surfaced today aren't a great indictment of Ben. They don't look good because Ben looks very unhappy. You saw Tobias speak to the media. He didn't sound too thrilled about the situation. Seth, for the past week, has told every reporter that's asked him, because every single one has, I just mind my own business. I don't care what Ben does. He's here. That's all I know. Danny has said similar things and pretty damning things over the offseason. So what I think is happening right now is that Ben reported to camp to work because he doesn't want to lose the money. So he's there to work. And him coming back to work, he makes himself more marketable. Not only himself personality-wise for another team to maybe bring him into their locker room, but also from a Sixers perspective, because if this guy's able to remind organizations of who regular season Ben Simmons is, that helps out for trade packages a little bit. But I'm not sure Ben Simmons wants to really be here. And I kind of have this theory that maybe the Rich Paul agency sent him into the Sixers camp to be a distraction, to mess with the chemistry. So the Sixers organization either has to send him home or they have to grant him a trade for a package that they didn't really want. They have to settle a little bit just to get this guy out of the locker room. That's what my theory at the moment is. But the thing that's crazy is that Ben Simmons' agent, his agency, didn't know the dude was showing up to the stadium to get a COVID test 4 days ago. And the Sixers didn't either. That was Ben Simmons motivated, it sounds like. So I just really don't know where Ben's head at. You could see Ben suit up next week. I don't think he's going to play Wednesday or Friday, but there's potential Ben suits up next week. The problem is there's just no clarity. Doc has no idea, and Ben hasn't said anything. So we'll see what he has to say tomorrow. I'm assuming you're going to get typical Ben where he's just disinterested, scratching the head, giving you blank answers, doesn't really want to talk about it. I'm sure he's going to issue a statement because you can't do this and act like it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But my biggest concern is if anything's going on internally. Because the players, it's apparent in their pressers, don't want to talk about it anymore. So I know these guys are fed up. I just want to know what's going on behind closed doors, like what those conversations are like, if Ben's apologized to anybody, if Embiid said anything to Ben. But I think the Sixers organization, the players there, have kind of put this behind them. It's about the Sixers now and no longer Ben. Ben coming back to camp and doing this makes it all about Ben. But I think the players have a similar mission. Let's go beat the Bucks. Let's go beat Brooklyn. Let's go play who's in front of us. Let's go beat the New Orleans Pelicans. I don't really think they care too much for the Ben theatrics right now.
Yeah, and you hit it right there. The players got to be tired of this shit. Yeah, I totally agree. And you mentioned the same thing that not necessarily where I decided like I really want to trade Ben Simmons, because there's part of me that wanted to trade him anyways, just to see what was out there, what we could get for Ben Simmons that maybe would fit better beside Joel Embiid. But after he, decided not to meet up with his teammates, I just thought that was like the biggest slap in the face. And the biggest part for me is like, how do you go to war with this guy? Like, if he shows you he doesn't have your back, like, I'm just looking at him at practice. Like, how can you be that unhappy around guys like Joel Embiid that you have hooped with for the last 4 or 5 years? Guys like Tobias Harris that you have hooped with for the last 3 years. These guys that he's built relationships, guys like Danny Green, who stood up for him to the press and to the fans. I don't understand how you can like kind of turn your back on these guys And, even Tyrese Maxey, who's, they are obviously friends. They hoop together and they train together in the same gym. They have the same agent. How does he feel in all this? I'm the same as you. I'm wondering what it's like behind the scenes. The last thing I wanted to ask you about it, is there any part of you that feels like, what Chili said here, you got to drop Rich Paul after this jump. Is there any part of you that feels like Ben Simmons showing up to the arena or to the Sixers facility without telling his agency, without telling the Sixers, who maybe would have reached out to the agency? Is there any part of you that feels like he is close to being done with Rich Paul, and maybe Rich Paul did totally sabotage this situation?
After what happened with Nerlens Noel, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't put it past Rich Paul, but being completely honest with you, I've got no idea how Ben Simmons operates. I can't get a read on the guy. I mean, for the past 4 years, all we've talked about is how big of an enigma he is because of his game alone. Like, what's going on with this guy? If we can't figure out his game, we're not even close to figuring out what his mental is. And right now, there could be some problems with him mentally. There could be anxiety. There could be depression. I don't know what he's got going on. I hope whatever it is, he gets it situated. But the fact of the matter is, Ben Simmons is a ball player. No one's questioning that. He's a dog. He's a ball player. But what I question is this. I'm doing a breakdown, right? I go 5 underrated players to watch for in 2021. One of them was R.J. Barrett, okay? And what was the reputation for R.J. Barrett? Coming out of college, first season, he couldn't shoot. This dude can't shoot. He can't shoot threes. And his first season kind of would prove that. Like, he wasn't a great three-point shooter. The looks weren't great. The shot wasn't great. RJ almost revolutionized his entire game. And RJ's kind of similar to Ben in that he can dribble with both his left and right hand proficiently. He can get to the rack. He'll give you trench work. But RJ's not afraid to shoot now. Yeah. He'll take 16-foot shots. He'll take corner threes. He'll take pull-up threes, step-back threes, this and that. And I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, like, this guy had a similar reputation as Ben, just as young, if not younger than Ben, not as paid as Ben, didn't get as much out of school as Ben, coming out of college into the NBA in terms of situation. So why has Ben never taken that next step? You look at Embiid. Embiid's had progression every season. The growth from 2 seasons ago to last with Embiid was off the charts. You can't even put into words how much better Embiid got. And he was already fantastic. So I watch these players, the Devin Bookers, the Tatums, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe Ben just doesn't have that dog in him. But the fact of the matter is, Ben is a ball player. Wherever he's going to go, he's going to ball out. Yeah. The situation might not be great in Philly, and right now it looks pretty toxic. But this can change overnight because, look, we didn't think Ben would report at all, and he did. He showed up. So it's a fluid situation, but you're not going to get a read on Ben from Doc, from Tyrese, from anybody, because right now nobody's saying anything. So let's hope to get some clarity from this guy tomorrow, but I doubt
it. I'm with you, and we'll kind of let the Sixers talk ride there. As far as expectations for this season, as I'm thinking about it, to be honest with you, bro, it's almost no point in asking about it right now. Just because things could change so rapidly, or things could not change so rapidly. My thoughts are, if Ben Simmons isn't here, do they get something in return for him? Are they playing without? Like, how is that going to work out? And it's hard to measure what the expectations are for the Sixers. I'll let you know now. I think that the Sixers, personally, I think they could become the 4th seed in the East without Ben. I think they're right in that range. And the only reason I say the 4th seed is because you got to give time for guys like Maxey, these guys to get accustomed in the rotation with more minutes, Matisse Thybulle, those type of players. I think they could hit, a really high point by the time they actually get to the playoffs, even though their seeding may not make them a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. I think they could get to that point. But once again, we can't predict the future. We don't know what this team looks like without Ben Simmons. And we don't know if they're going to have Ben Simmons. They may end up they could end up playing the whole season with him. They could end up playing a half a season with him. And, who knows what that does for the roster. But I'm with you. It's hard to even read this situation anymore. There's just so many rumors that have came out. And my only problem, and I guess we'll see if he solves it tomorrow by, kind of following up on these rumors. I doubt it. I doubt he gives us much, if anything. But that's been my biggest problem is if any of this isn't true, just come out and say that. You know what I mean?
And then fire Rich Paul.
Yeah, or fire Rich Paul. As simple as that. I think, the reason I asked that question is because if he fired Rich Paul, this could get swept under the rug, honestly. You could blame it all literally on Rich Paul, and it all gets swept under the rug. We can see how everything plays out. Maybe he increases his value. We trade him if he really is unhappy. But it's just a lot of different factors that are involved in this situation. And a lot of stuff is uncontrollable.
It is. And the pressing issue for me is that I'm a media studies production major. I say this every time. Every time I go live, I find a way to talk about this crap. But what they teach us at school is like how to consume media and how to be a free thinker with media. Because as you know, media can be very deceptive. What you see on the news, what you see on sports networks, on Twitter. The pressing issue for me is that I always got to look at this from the outside looking in. Like there were situations like this in Houston, in New Orleans with the Lakers, but never in-house. Now that it's directly in-house, like right in the city, right where I'm at, it's like I got to read this stuff every day and juggle like what I think is real, what I don't think is real. And it's so difficult because I'm naturally inclined to believe nothing or at least be skeptical about what I see on social media. And one thing I've noticed is that nothing has come directly from Ben Simmons. Everything is a secondary source or Jake Fisher, who killed it this offseason, but he's reporting everything. It's coming from Bleacher Report. It's coming from The Athletic. And the problem with media and mobile media is that stuff spreads like wildfire, quicker than wildfire. So one person throws a report out, the credibility doesn't matter. Everybody loses their mind that day until something replaces it in the media cycle. And Ben has been the topic of discussion for 2-3 months now. So Ben could come out tomorrow and be like, I never said this. I never said this. I never felt this way about that. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's just the pressing issue for me, is determining what I believe and what I don't believe. But what's concrete is that Ben didn't show up, he didn't get his money, and now he's here. So based on inference, I'm led to believe that Ben's just here to get his money and potentially get traded. But the silver lining is that if the Sixers were going to just trade Ben, if they were just going to get rid of Ben for a package that probably isn't worth Ben's game, they would have done it by now. They had their opportunity to do it during the draft. They had their opportunity in the offseason just weeks ago. Like, if they were going to do that, they would have done it by now. So I think at the very least, they get a package they want. If they don't, look, Ben, you got to sit out until we get a package we want for you. And I think they're fine doing that because the kid's under contract for 4 years. So it's not like Ben could just walk in free agency, go sign with the Boston Celtics, and then give the Sixers hell for the next 5 years. They can't do that. Right. So they can very well tell him, we're going to trade you to OKC. You're going to sit down here, or they're just going to wait until they think they have an opportunity, a Bradley Beal, a Dame Lillard. But I think the silver lining in all this is that if the Sixers were just going to get rid of Ben for a stick of deodorant, they would have done it by now.
Yeah. You would have never went through this media frenzy, causing this on your team, putting this stress on them. And the final thing I'll say about the Sixers just as a whole is, through everything that has happened this summer, there is part of me that believes that it could just make that team stronger and more well-rounded, more together. We talked about that chemistry and Ben kind of messing that up. But I think, his actions, like I said before the show, before we got on here, I'm not going to be petty and judge every single move, every single picture that's coming from practice of Ben Simmons. But at the same time, if I'm sitting here watching this guy leave practice without going in the huddle, without gathering around the team, any of the guys that were on the fence about what they believe, because, some of those guys on that team are probably sitting here dealing with the shit the same way we are. Mm-hmm. They don't know how Ben's feeling. They're not able to talk to Ben directly. They're getting from different sources around them. So it's like once you step in that practice facility and you're with him in person and you see those actions, that could be a deciding factor for you as well as looking at him as a brother through the hoop industry. So that's just my final note. I hope that the Sixers can kind of rally off of that point, just to make an even better product for the NBA this year.
I'd like to know, just to interrupt real quick.
Yeah.
I know the Sixers had a team group chat they talked about plenty last year. I want to know what happened. Like, was it typical high school drama? Like, did Ben get kicked from the group chat? Did he leave? Is he still there?
Do you think now that, and this is kind of a side question, do you think once he is moved, once he is gone, do you think stuff like that will start to leak out?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. I don't see why it wouldn't. You see some of that stuff leaking out now. I saw, I don't know what it was, something that came from last season about Ben not being loved in the locker room. Or I don't remember what it was, but that always happens. Like now you look back with the Jimmy Butler and Brett Brown stuff, and new stuff always emerges with that. So I'm sure eventually, like, you might get Joel Embiid, like, yeah, this guy's we went to the club and he spent $50,000. He spent a band on this girl. Like, I don't know. Some dirt's gonna come out on Ben. It might not be right now, but
I can't wait for it though, honestly. So we'll move off the Sixers. We got to get through these segments. I swear this happens every single time. Bro.
It's problematic, but let's get it.
Let's fly through the contenders. I do want to get to the regular season award finalists. Just some guys that you have your eye on this season, because I know you're really into the player development. You mentioned some of the guys that you're looking at coming into the season, which you mentioned RJ Barrett, which I don't know if you know it, but I am a Duke basketball fan. So
yeah, I'm hip.
So RJ Barrett is my guy. Cam Reddish, all of those guys out of the Duke Brotherhood there. I keep my eye on all those guys around the league. But legit contenders this year, I just want to go through the list, kind of get your idea on every single one of these teams that I have marked down. And then if you have any teams that you feel may creep up on the spot, similar to what, the Phoenix Suns did last year.
Yeah.
They went out, they got Chris Paul, and all of a sudden they're in the NBA Finals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's as simple as that, and that's kind of crazy. But the first team I want to start with, the LA Lakers. How do you feel after you saw all of those free agents head to LA? Melo, Dwight, DeAndre Jordan, Malik Monk, Kendrick Nunn. I mean, you go down the list, and these guys have talent. Don't get me wrong. Russ is the big one that I'm forgetting there. How do you feel about the fit? How do you feel about the Lakers as a whole coming into this season with all those new faces?
A little disappointed in LeBron James. I'll say that. I like to say that when I talk to people 45 and older, I'll call Michael Jordan the GOAT, maybe Wilt, depending on how old the person is. But people my age, I usually say LeBron's the GOAT, because if I don't, they're going to give me problems. I don't know if I can say that anymore, because Michael Jordan wasn't running around recruiting Gary Payton to come play with him. Steph Curry wasn't running around. I mean, Kevin Durant, granted, signed with the Golden State Warriors, but Steph Curry, Clay, Draymond, that was all homegrown. LeBron is still LeBron. He's one of a 1% company in the world in terms of basketball talent. You pair that with Anthony Davis and 12 free agents, and they're just picking up Avery Bradley off the street today and adding guys. It's like this team is legitimately like 15, 16 deep, right? So I think that the Lakers will be the eventual NBA champions. I think the health is the only thing that really stands in their way, but the Los Angeles Lakers are loaded. I can't wait to see the fit with Westbrook, 3-6-0, Anthony Davis, and LeBron. But I'm more so excited about Malik Monk's game in Los Angeles than I am anybody else. And that's plenty about Malik Monk, but he had a great camp, and I think he's going to really thrive in LA. I don't know if he's going to start or be that sixth-man, seventh-man role, but I'm excited to see if he can kind of rejuvenate his career in LA, different spot.
And I love that you brought up Malik Monk, because that was one of the guys that I just really wanted the Sixers to take a shot on in the offseason. And obviously, if LeBron's knocking at your door, if the LA Lakers are knocking at your door, you're going to LA.
I miss the days when a vet minimum was signed by a guy that's 33 years old, not 23 years old.
And that's the thing about the Lakers in this situation with guys like Kendrick Nunn and like Malik Monk. These guys are young. So you get these guys in here with LeBron, with AD, and low-key you're setting up the future if you're able to retain these guys, or these guys just get a nice developmental year, getting playoff experience, and then they can go spread that wealth elsewhere. But love the Malik Monk reference there, because I think he's going to be huge for them. Just that scoring punch, natural, pure scorer, can shoot the lights out. And I haven't heard much about the Lakers camp, but now that you said that he's had a great camp, I'm actually excited to see this team play. Yeah. We talk about guys like Melo. Melo's one of my favorite players ever. One of the best scorers ever. and one of the realest dudes in the NBA.
Yeah,
and this is his best shot at a ring that he's ever had.
Yeah.
And part of me hopes that he can get it, but
I do too.
Part of me is not feeling the Lakers in this 15 free agent team. But no. Next team I want to knock off the list here, and it kind of feeds into the Kyrie Irving situation, which another one of those unpredictable situations. I don't know if you are going to go out on the limb here, but me personally, I can't. Knowing Kyrie from Duke days, this guy has always been an outside the box thinker. There's no way you're going to predict what he's about to do or say. But what I want to ask you is, can the Nets still win the NBA championship without Kyrie Irving?
It's difficult because Kyrie offers so much, both as a playmaker, a bucket getter, a point guard. But the Milwaukee Bucks won the championship last season, and they were about a half an inch, a quarter of an inch from not even advancing past that series. And that was Kevin Durant and Jeff Green. There wasn't really a healthy James Harden. He was more of a decoy. So after seeing KD put on that performance, I can't write him off. I'm going to say KD can drop anybody off in the championship format. If James Harden's healthy, which he says he is, he's at full health, that's one of, if not, the best hoopers in the NBA, just in terms of pure game, like facilitating, playing the 1 and 2, getting a bucket whenever. I think Brooklyn, if those two are healthy, can compete with anybody. Now, I think the Paul Millsaps, the Blake Griffins, the LaMarcus Aldridges, that might be a little bit of fool's gold because those guys are past their prime, but still, they're just adding bodies, and they did a good job of that in the offseason, just adding depth to kind of help Kevin Durant and James Harden out. If there is a situation where it's like, hey, the 4th, 5th, and 6th guy on this team got hurt, now it's the 7th, 8th, 9th men in that role. Can you still win? Last year, KD almost did that by himself single-handedly, also with the help of, 8 threes from Jeff Green in that Game 7 game. So I'm not going to write Brooklyn off regardless of if Kyrie is there or not. But if Kyrie is there, that is the team that will give everybody in the East a run for their money, and the Lakers or whoever comes out of the West.
Yeah. And then the only other thing I wanted to ask you about Kyrie, any shot at him getting traded at all? Like, what is just your personal intuition, like your feel on it?
I don't think Kyrie gets traded. I think that bond between James and KD is pretty strong. But one thing that makes me question that is Brooklyn won't extend Kyrie. And I don't know if that's because of the vaccine situation or because they don't think Kyrie is a part of their future and the money might not work. But I don't know if Kyrie gets traded because he's threatened retiring. If he does get traded, I know he went on IG Live and said he's not retiring. I don't think Kyrie would retire, but he could throw a similar fit that Ben Simmons is throwing if Brooklyn does potentially want to trade him. Now, in terms of the vaccine, it's not my business to speak on. So whatever Kyrie's decision is, that's his decision. But I will say, if we get deprived of a Kyrie Irving season, that's a loss for everybody because it's a privilege to get to watch that guy go to work.
Yeah, and something I liked from his IG video was how he emphasized, he's not retiring. Like, he loves hooping at the end of the day, and you see it with his Uncle Drew persona, that whole off the NBA court. He does just at the end of the day like to hoop. Like, he loves basketball, and that's something I can appreciate from anybody. The next team I wanted to get to, and our buddy here in the comments actually mentioned something about him earlier in the show, the Phoenix Suns. So I said, how last season they kind of swept everybody off their feet, and some did see it coming into the playoffs. So I'm not going to sit here and act like they were, just this huge underdog. They played really well throughout the season, and by the time they were in the playoffs, they had recognition. Apparently, there's something going on with DeAndre Ayton. I'm not sure if I missed that with the contract situation. I know they just gave the extension to Mikal Bridges. I believe they gave an extension to Landry Shamet as well.
Yep.
Am I right? Okay.
Yeah, so then Chris Paul got that.
Chris Paul got re-signed, and then so do you have the lowdown as far as what's going on with DeAndre Ayton? Are they just stuck in?
I don't think they can make the finances work. That's from my understanding. They can't make the finances work, but I believe I saw that DeAndre Ayton is the first overall pick. He was the first overall pick, right?
He was.
I'm not tripping. He was the first overall pick since Anthony Bennett to not receive a full max contract extension since that draft. I'm not sure how true that is. I saw that in scrolling, but It really is crazy. Wouldn't that be a crazy turn of events that DeAndre Ayton had the postseason he had and was such an integral part, so vital to Phoenix's success last season, and they just don't give him that contract? Not like it's a little disrespectful. I'm sure
Weird,
DA
man.
Yeah. About it.
Yeah, it's weird because then you see them go out and extend Mikal Bridges, extend guys like Landry Shamet, but you still haven't given your big guy his money. That is a little odd to me. But with that being said, how are you feeling about – oh, he said, I don't think he's worth the max.
Restricted, okay.
Honestly, he's restricted. Interesting. So, I don't know. Aiden's important, man. You
172 mil. Well, look, money doesn't exist. Money doesn't exist. You see these who like – shout out JJJ. He just got the $105 million contract with Memphis. But what this goes to show you, not the DA situation, just the money going around, is how good of hands the NBA is in. Because these guys will get max contracts within their first 3 seasons in the NBA. Like teams are, okay, you got potential. You're under. Let's go sign this dude. But I kind of agree that maybe after giving all that money out, DA might not be worth that 172 he's asking. And I think the players in his draft class might also, how good they're performing might also have something to do with it. Like he sees all these dudes get paid and he wants his money, rightfully so. I'm surprised Phoenix isn't more willing to work something out because he did have a fantastic postseason. But still there are limitations to his game. So another team will pay him that money, I'm sure. But right now it's like, where's this money coming from? Like, who's going to have money to afford anybody? These draft picks get signed. What happened? Like, we talked about a 23-year-old signing a vet minimum. What happened to a rookie playing on a rookie contract? NFL rookies get $40 million guaranteed contracts now. NBA rookies get $8 million AAV and then just trash that and then sign legitimate contracts. Like, what did Ann Edwards just sign? Ann Edwards just got a huge contract. He got drafted last year. So I don't know who's going to have the money to afford anybody in 10 years, 5 years.
Yeah, Michael Porter Jr. just got the huge contract, which, I mean, his potential, I feel it. It's so quick, the turnaround, one good – I can't say one good season, but one, season where he shows heavy growth and he gets that huge contract from Denver. What I wanted to ask you about the Suns, what are their chances of getting back to the NBA Finals? Did you like anything they did over the offseason? They were able to retain guys. That's what they mostly did this offseason. How are you feeling about the Suns?
I like the Shaman addition. I think some of what they lacked in the postseason was a consistent knockdown three-point shooter. But I'll say as long as Chris Paul and Monty are together, they're going to keep that team competitive. Now, what people might not be accounting for is another season for Devin Booker, another offseason to continually get better. And this is going to kind of segue into maybe dark horse candidates. But I think these young these 22 to 25-year-old hoopers, they can it feels like for the first time in over 10 years, these young hoopers can really dethrone the LeBron Jameses, the KDs of the NBA. So I think as long as Devin Booker's healthy, Phoenix can be a top 5 seed. I'll say the same for Dallas. I mean, people don't know what Luka can come. Luka could come out. Luka can win MVP, and Dallas can be a 1 seed. Like, you just don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. So I think the same can be said for people aren't going to like this one, the Boston Celtics. Like, you don't know what Jason Tatum's capable of. The dude can come out next season and drop 30 a game and potentially win MVP. Like, you just don't know. These young guys are so good. And that's why I like the NBA right now. It's so exciting. Like, SGA can show up to a game in 3 days for OKC. OKC can be a top 8 seed if SGA just balls out. The same can be said for John Morant, for Zion. Like, there's so much parity, and yet there's no parity at all because of the Lakers and the Brooklyn Nets. But the NBA, it's in a really great spot right now.
And, it's funny you mention that because if you just take some of those guys off the Lakers or some of those guys off the Nets and just add them to some of those younger guys, those younger stars in the league's teams, all of a sudden they do climb up the rankings a little bit with a little bit of help. The final thing the final team I should say I wanted to get to, and then we'll get into some dark horses amongst the contenders there. The Milwaukee Bucks. We haven't talked at all about Giannis on this show just yet. Is there any part of you that feels like the Bucks can get back there and repeat? shut the world up again. Giannis elevate his game to an even higher level, which, mind you, I was so impressed with Giannis in the playoffs, man.
Goodness.
And I'm not some Giannis fan. I'm not a Milwaukee fan, obviously, but there is no way you could watch his growth in the playoffs and not be almost proud of this man. Like I was literally proud to see somebody grow like that as a player. Thoughts on the Milwaukee Bucks? They get a guy like Dante DiVincenzo back as well, coming back from the injury, who's a big rotational piece. What are your thoughts on the Bucks this season?
The chemistry won't be any different. The mission won't be any different. They could burn out. That's one thing I might look out for. They had to play that extended postseason. They go all the way to the finals. Now it's a quick turnaround. Like, we did have an off season, but nonetheless, think about it. The bubble was a year ago. This month a year ago. Somehow, I don't know how that's real, but the bubble was a year ago. So Milwaukee's played a lot of basketball since that point. You have to watch for them burning out, but they have one of, if not the best trio in basketball between Drew, between Chris, and Giannis. You talk about Giannis elevating his game in the postseason. Absolutely. I'm proud of Giannis just from his journey from where he was way back when he was hooping with Greece to where he is now. I'm proud of Chris Middleton, too. Chris really shut a lot of haters up, changed the narrative in the postseason, and hooped. And the thing with Milwaukee is the mission's the same, but Giannis was the heart and soul of that team, right? If Giannis wants to go to the chip, he's going to find a way to get there. Yeah. And I think I got a little comfortable with maybe doubting Giannis, and I didn't really care too much from Milwaukee last season, and we got caught up in this Sixers one-seed craze, and we're like, oh, Mike Budenholzer, he's grown stale out there. But really, Giannis did in the postseason what he's been doing for the past 3-4 years, and that's just dominating. So you look at Giannis, he's a force. You can't guard him anywhere within the perimeter, or you got to build a wall, send bodies at him.
Okay.
But if Giannis is playing the way he's played in the preseason, and I know it's preseason, but the difference between comparing maybe an Isaiah Joe preseason to a Giannis preseason is that you're not looking at who Giannis is playing against. You're looking at what he's doing with his game.
Yeah.
And if you've watched this preseason, it's been pull-up threes, off-the-dribble takes from the mid-range, fadeaway mid-range shots, and they're looking really fluent like he's doing them with ease. So I think Giannis maybe this offseason address some of those struggles within the perimeter, the three-point shooting, the stuff at the free throw line. And if he gets that all right, I don't know why Giannis and the Bucks can't make it back to the NBA Finals. Yeah,
and you mentioned it. I was in that same boat. I mean, we were talking about the Bucks in the regular season. Crazy thing is, Giannis, he has 2 MVPs now.
Yeah,
he could have easily won the MVP last season with his numbers. It was just the fact that they fell to the 3 seed, right? Like, that's a bad thing. But I think it got to a mute point where we don't care what he does in the regular season if he's not going to show up and do the same thing in the playoffs. And now we no longer can say that. Now, what I want to get to as far as contenders, I want to, if you have like a dark horse contender, maybe from the Eastern Conference, maybe from the Western Conference, just some lower key teams that you're kind of looking at, think they really have a shot at winning the championship this year.
In the West, I think Dallas. I really do think Luka has the potential to win MVP and take that team to a 1, 2, 3 seed. Look, I love Kawhi Leonard. That's one of my favorite basketball players I've ever watched. PG was getting buckets last season, and that was a deep Clippers team. Now, ultimately, they beat Dallas. But the way I was feeling before that series was that the Clippers were going to obliterate Dallas.
Yeah.
Luka, after 2 games, changed my mind. And I watched Luka treat Kawhi Leonard like he was a little boy. And that wasn't just a Kawhi Leonard Clippers team. That's a Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Serge Ibaka, Reggie Jackson, Pat Beverly. The list goes on, Clippers team. And Luka single-handedly did that. So I think a lot of people might be sleeping on Dallas and Luka. They got a little better over the offseason. New coach, new staff. I think Dallas is going to have an underratedly great season. In the East, our guy is on fire in the comment section. First, I wanted to allude to that Giannis knee injury. I completely forgot that shit even happened.
Yeah.
That was a free extension. I forgot that even happened. So
I didn't want to interrupt you when you were talking about him, but yes, I saw that on the side, and I was like, yeah, just something more to be proud about. Like, this man
and look,
came back.
another great comment. The Warriors. I was going to move to the East. I forgot about the Warriors. Steph Curry, if he wasn't the 8th seed last year, would have won the MVP.
Yeah.
That was the most productive individual player in basketball last season. And he was playing with Nico Mannion, Kelly Oubre, and Jordan Poole. You get a healthy Clay. Draymond's there. They drafted well. They got some new blood in there. There's always the chance the Warriors make a trade or a deadline move to get somebody like Bradley Beal. Who knows? They got a lot of young assets. But I think as long as Clay and Steph are healthy, that team's a top 5 team in the NBA, not just in the West, in the NBA. So the Warriors and Dallas, I'll say dark horses in the Western Conference. And if Steph comes full circle and drops LeBron off in the postseason, there's nothing more I would love than that. Because I used to hate Steph and the Warriors, and I needed LeBron to drop them off because they were so good. Now I need it to come first full circle. I need Steph to make LeBron atone for his sins, getting all those free agents. Now, if we look out east, I'll do it real briefly because I've been talking your ear off. I'm going to say Chicago. That was one of my clear picks. Lonzo, defensive straps, so they do have defense in the front court now. Lonzo is a catch-and-shoot menace. Zach LaVine, obviously, one of the best pure hoopers in the NBA. Nikola Jokic, a great center. But they have good depth now. Derek Jones Jr., Alex Caruso. They spent money. They got ball players. And I love Billy Donovan as a head coach. So Chicago. I'm also going to say out east. This one could be surprising. I don't think they're going to come anywhere close to competing for a championship. But I like Charlotte, bro. I like Charlotte.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
For a chip, but I like Charlotte making the playoffs. Not Lonzo. LaMelo is one of my favorite players. They got deeper, too. They added some depth. I think if they have LaMelo healthy for a full season, they'll make a playoff berth.
I do love LaMelo. I love what Michael Jordan's doing there in Charlotte with that squad. They got a bunch of dogs in there, guys like Miles Bridges, P.J. Washington, another guy who can stretch the floor. Yeah,
but P.J. Washington, fallen soldier. You know what I'm talking about. Fallen soldier. He needs an OG in his life to give him some advice. Stay the hell away from Brittany Renner, dog. She's not for you. She's for everybody. It's just your turn. A wise man told me that.
Oh, man. Bless his young heart, bro. The one team I wanted to point out from the East, and maybe they're not even a dark horse after they knocked the Sixers out last year, but I'm looking at the Atlanta Hawks, man, and that's a scary squad. I know people are talking about the rule changes, how that's going to affect Trae Young. In my opinion, I feel like Hoopers figure out ways to hoop better, and he'll adjust to the league, just like everybody else is going to have to adjust to those new rules. And like I said, I hate to say it, you're looking at a team that's going to get a guy like Cam Reddish back, who's a walking bucket. Yep. DeAndre Hunter, 3-and-D. He can shoot the mid. He's good all-around player, if we're being honest. He could take a step forward in his game as well. He's still young. And then I'm looking at a full year under Nate McMillan. He became the head coach halfway through the season last year. And after that point, they were literally the best team in the NBA. At least the best record in the East from that point on throughout the rest of the season. So I'm looking at the Atlanta Hawks in the East. Also, Trae Young and John Collins just getting another summer of development under their belt.
They drafted very well, too.
They did. Jalen Johnson.
All the picks out the park.
Yeah. and you're looking at other guys. Didn't even hit on Bogdanovich, Kevin Porter, who killed the Sixers. Oh, my God. So you throw all of that back into the mix. Even a guy like Lou Will coming off the bench. So they got a lot of pieces there and a lot of pieces that have room to grow as well. They're a real young team. And I think that experience, against the Sixers, against the Bucks there in the Eastern Conference Finals, that is a good nod towards them being successful this season. The other team that I'm looking at in the West, and I was going to get to the Warriors because I don't know. Part of me, I just felt like they're not a dark horse. Like it's Steph. Like I'm not.
They're the Warriors.
It's the Golden State Warriors. But maybe they are. Yeah, and my man said it here. I can't stand. After he had the T-shirt with Joel Embiid on that, I cannot mess with that, man.
It was like nobody wanted to get in front of John Collins in games 5 through 7. He was crashing boards, cutting. I'm like, where's this dude coming from?
Yeah.
And nobody wanted to get in front of him.
I was asking people where the dignity was. You letting this man body up, like, get the whole building aroused. Like, the other team that I wanted to look at in the West, and by any means, this is not like my list of this is not my full list of contenders. There's teams like the Miami Heat, the Denver Nuggets that are in the mix there that we just didn't get to touch on. And maybe this team that I'm about to say is not necessarily a dark horse, but I think that they're falling into that Milwaukee Bucks in the East type of situation. And I'm looking at the Utah Jazz, who are still in the conversation. Obviously, they were the 1 seed in the West last season. But in my eyes, I feel like they've hit this stale point with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, this duo. It's like time for them to really take the next steps. And you kind of won't believe it until they do it in the playoffs, until you see Rudy Gobert have to guard the perimeter, have to be effective on offense. But Donovan Mitchell, I mean, this dude is a dog.
Killer.
And you mentioned, MVP, just kind of sleeper candidates. He's one of those guys that are up there for me as well. If he could take another step in his game, I thought his numbers were crazy last season, and he got that team to a number 1 seed. So if he can take the next step in his game, he's another guy that I can see up there with the Tatums, the Lukas that can, take that team wherever they need to go. But I don't know. How do you feel about the Utah Jazz this season?
That's a great point. Like, I'm thinking if I'm a franchise owner and I had to start my franchise with one player, I would definitely have to consider Donovan Mitchell, of course, under a certain age, but he's a killer. And that's a guy I want to go to war with. Look, defensively, Utah's always going to be good. They've got good chemistry. Offensively, they swing the ball, and they're one of the most potent offenses in the league. So Utah, I do agree they've kind of hit a stalemate, but it's the wild, wild West. So if you want to make it to the chip, you got to see the LeBrons and the Steph Currys. So Utah, to your point, is at a very transformative point in their legacy. Can they get over the top? And they keep addressing what they have to address in free agency. So their bench got better, and they solidified their rotations. And now it's just having your actions speak louder than your words. But also, to kind of conclude this conversation, we didn't get to say every team, but we're hip to what's going on. So we know Miami is potentially a championship contender. We know Boston has a chance to compete. We know out West something could happen magnificent with Denver or with Memphis. But the NBA is in great hands, and we get to watch this. We get to watch all the drama, all the excitement, the highs and the low for free. I mean, if you buy League Pass, but we get to watch it all for free. So I'm just blessed that we get to do that and also have the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, it's an incredible opportunity. And you talk about the era that we're in with the NBA, so many young stars every single year. And this is kind of, it's a great segue into the final segment of the show. We'll run through these quick. I do not want to hold you here for 2 hours, my man.
I don't mind.
But we will get to some of the young guys because I do want to talk with you about Rookie of the Year, Most Improved Player of the Year as well. But first, let's start with maybe the most important, award of them all, the MVP award. When I was going through, and it's kind of something that we've, mentioned throughout the show tonight, there's like an endless name of players that I could see just stepping up to that. Like, as I started to go down the list, you have like the obvious ones of like KD and Harden and Steph and LeBron, even Embiid and Jokic. But you get to that next level, and I don't mean it like a level like they're just above this level of these other players, but just guys that you're not maybe thinking about for that MVP. Joel, if healthy, MVP, or Steph.
So literally in that order, those are my picks.
Literally. So literally I had mine in tiers here. So I did have I had Embiid and Jokic at the top of my list. Kind of tied there, honestly. I think Jamal Murray is going to make Jokic's life easier this season. Another guy I had on the list, obviously Giannis, just what we've seen so far, kind of rebounded. But my worry with him is that he'll kind of get slighted at this point, winning 2 MVPs already. But then I have other guys like Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, who you mentioned earlier, Luka Doncic, obviously. He's another guy who's probably in reality in that top 3 level just because what his team relies on him for. I'm also looking at Jason Tatum And then I just threw Trae Young in there at the bottom, and maybe I'm like miraged by what happened in the playoffs. I'm just so like worn down by that series that I'm just on this show like really riding the Atlanta Hawks here. But I just feel like Trae, his game, it's borderline unstoppable. I mean, his shooting ability, scoring ability with the pick and roll with Clint Capella and John Collins. How do you stop that without fouling him or fouling the roller?
And the dude's like 2 inches taller than me. Out there getting buckets with guys that are 6'7", sitting like Trae is really an amazing hooper.
So you said at the top of your list you got Joel Jokic.
Joel Steph. I think last season if Steph wasn't the 8th seed, he should have won, or would have rather won MVP. Yeah. I'm going with Joel Embiid, of course, just because his production was unprecedented for the amount of minutes he played. I mean, at one point, like Jokic had played about 15 more games than Embiid, close to 500 more minutes than Embiid, and yet Embiid was a better scorer, more points, more double-doubles, more. What I looked at throughout the season and tracked was halves with 20-plus points. Joel Embiid was head and shoulders above everybody else. But a player above Joel Embiid by a significant margin was Steph Curry.
Yeah.
So to me, those are the two most dominant players in basketball at the moment, with the exception of Giannis because of voters fatigue and everything. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, nah, that doesn't sound good. Because it's like, who's to say James Harden might not win MVP? Kevin Durant can do some crazy regular season nonsense. I mean, I want to say Luka real bad. Luke is my guy who I really want to pick for an MVP candidate. So I'll just say Embiid, Steph, Luka in that order. I'll just keep it short sweet. Let's go Embiid, Steph, Luka.
I like that. And when you look at those three players, I think what you have to kind of give them the nod for is how much they're going to be relied on as well within their own teams. And Tatum's another guy, just sleeping there. Sleep on that boy. But that man, he is a walk-in.
His development makes me
all together.
His development makes me nervous. As a Sixers fan, a basketball fan, I love it.
Yeah.
Tatum's development makes me nervous.
He's a killer. The next one I want to get to, Coach of the Year. Now, this one is a little bit harder for me. It's going to be based on how this season plays out, how these teams, what they have to go through. Who would be your front runner for Coach of the Year this year?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of everybody that got hired. It's usually a first-year coach, and the team has a miraculous season no one expected. So I'd have to do a little more research to prepare. But I want to say Tom Thibodeau. I think he got not slighted. Monty rightfully got Coach of the Year last season, right? Monty was the Coach of the Year. I'm not tripping about that. I can't. I
feel like I got confused by it because I'm pretty sure Monty Williams was announced very early.
Yeah.
And I feel like they went back to Tom Thibodeau, unless it was just like two separate Coach of the Year. Like, I swear I saw Tom Thibodeau winning.
That's why I'm confused. But
let me look it up.
Just off the top of my head, I want to say Tom Thibodeau because if the Knicks play themselves into a top 5 seed somehow, and Thibodeau didn't get it last season. He was Coach of the Year?
Yeah, he was the Coach of the Year.
Scratch that. I'm completely bugging then.
No, I promise you, Brock. Monty Williams was the next Coach of the Year.
Didn't Monty get an award? Monty got an award. I just don't know what award it was for.
I don't know because I remember him like crying about it, right?
Yeah.
Am I tripping?
We're all okay. You give me your Coach of the Year pick because I'm all over the place.
I got you. So one, and it was a team you mentioned earlier with Jason Tatum, but I'm looking at Ime Udoka. He is one of the new hires that could really maybe just pick up where the Celtics left off. They went into the postseason beat up the team that didn't get to play together much throughout the regular season. He may just get a product that was already kind of there, and they just get to rejuvenate. They're back healthy. There's obvious ones like Steve Nash, Frank Vogel, if they get their teams to the 1 seed. But another guy I'm looking at, Nate McMillan from Atlanta with a full season. That's another guy. As far as like new head coaches, the only one I can think of, I mean, you can do Dallas, I guess. They got a new coach.
I'm going to pick Billy Donovan.
Am I tripping?
Yeah, Dallas got a new coach. They fired Rick Carlisle. Rick Carlisle's with Indiana. But I'm going to pick Billy Donovan, actually. I think Billy D makes some sense for Chicago.
Yeah, he's in
Regardless
Chicago.
if you got Vooch and Lonzo, if he still coaches that team into a top 3 seed, I think Billy Donovan will be a contender.
And I do like that pick, actually, because the Bulls have been kind of hidden for the last few years. Yeah. So it would be a nice coming out.
Jason Kidd's coaching the Mavericks.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was looking it up just to make sure.
Now I remember. Did you see the pic with Jason Kidd's collar on media day? He had like that crazy big collar. If you haven't seen it, you gotta look.
I did see it. Jason Kidd is a character, bro. I do fuck with him though. We'll move on. Rookie of the year. So this one, I don't know. A lot of rookie of the year is like fit to me. So it's about who's going to get the most opportunity. Who would be like your top 2 for rookie of the year?
I really love this class. So for me, it's tough to pick early. I'm going Jalen Green and Davion Mitchell. It depends, like you said, situation, how much Davion Mitchell actually plays in Sacramento.
Yeah.
But I think he's the type of player that you can't justify not playing. Like you have to find minutes for Davion Mitchell. Defensively, he's just too good, and offensively, he's cold-blooded. So Davion, but for me, Jalen Green is my favorite player in this class. And it's funny to some people, I don't know why, but he's playing with that chip on his shoulder of going second overall. Yeah. And like I said, some people might be like, bro, you went second overall. It's not that deep. But I think Jalen Green has a dog in him.
Yeah.
And you pair that with the chip on his shoulder, he's just a smooth bucket on offense. So you could see a situation out in Houston where they're not a top 8 seed out west, but they're not the worst team in the West. So Houston can be competitive under Coach Steven, and there are a bunch of young bucket getters out there. Jalen is in a great opportunity where he's going to get a lot of shots, play a lot of minutes. I think he'll edge out Cade Cunningham for Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how you felt about Cade Cunningham's fit in Detroit, kind of what he can do for that franchise.
I like Cade. I mean, he can do everything. He fills the box score, and there's a reason he went first overall, why Detroit had the opportunity to trade out of that pick and ultimately thought Cade Cunningham was that answer. He's been like that since middle school. So I like Cade. I've been following his game, but I just think the East is going to be really competitive this year, similar to the West. And I can kind of see Jalen Green having a more productive season with the amount of touches and minutes he'll play in Houston rather than Cade Cunningham, who might have to do more, play that point guard position or defer shots to certain players.
Share the ball with Jeremy Grant there in Detroit. Evan Mobley's another guy that I really like coming out of the draft. I just love his skill set in the build and what he does on the court. But another team in Cleveland where he may not be asked to do too much. You got Jared Allen out there. They still have Kevin Love on the roster. Lauri Markkanen's out there. Yeah, so they're a little congested there. But I did have Davion Mitchell on my list there. Like you said, a guy who straps up. He can get minutes on the court immediately when he comes into the NBA. The next thing I wanted to get to was Defensive Player of the Year. I'll go ahead and I'll shoot you my number 1, who I think is going to win it this season. And I do think it's going to be Bam Adebayo.
Dab me up. Let's go.
I'm not some Miami Heat fan, obviously. They're sort of a rival for the Sixers in these days. But Bam Adebayo does it all on the defensive. He does it a lot on the offensive end as well. But this is a defensive conversation. He can we talk about Gobert. I said Gobert.
Gobert is what he is. He's Goody Robert. There's a reason.
Oh, my goodness. So we talk about Gobert and his struggles to defend perimeter players. That's something that Bam Adebayo doesn't necessarily struggle with. Obviously, you don't want your center going up against point guards on a regular. But he is a guy that I've seen step out, guard Kyrie Irving in times. He does have that capability. So Bam Adebayo is at the top of my list. Some other guys, obviously Rudy Gobert is always going to be in the conversation. Ben Simmons, it's so interesting because it's can you include him in this when – we just don't even know if this man's going to play.
No idea.
But if he does, I do see him up there as well. He's got that type of defensive talent. And then just some other guys. Matisse Thybulle, if he gets in an elevated role, gets enough minutes. And then Draymond Green, of course, with the Golden State Warriors there. So he's always at the centerpiece of that defense. A sleeper I had was Joel Embiid. I doubt it. With him, he'll probably get a lot more attention in the MVP field. But he's a sleeper there if he steps up and Ben Simmons absent. The next one, and this is the one I was most excited to ask you about, is the most improved player, because I know you kind of put a focus on this. You mentioned RJ Barrett earlier, who's a guy that I actually have on this list. Who are some guys you're looking forward, and maybe you don't even think they're going to win most improved player, but maybe you can kind of just recite the top 5 that you had in your own.
You don't want to open that Pandora's box, bro. We'll be here for another 30 minutes. So I'm a basketball fan. I just like hoops. I can watch Nick Briz on YouTube. I can watch independent creators just pull up to parks and hoop. I work at a campus rec gym, and I just spend my entire shift watching kids hoop. So I love basketball, right? It's so fun watching the game. But what's more fun for me is looking for those guys that are in the first 2-3 years of their developmental stages, or the guys that aren't already the Jason Tatums or Devin Booker, kind of determining, well, who's going to ball out, who's going to develop into that. So that's really where my focus is. And that's why I love this question, because it gives me an opportunity to bring to light everybody I think is going to eventually ball out. Off the top of my head, Darius Garland out in Cleveland. I'm sure you're hip to Darius Garland. He's got a really good game. I think Darius is going to have a fantastic season. I'll pair him with Colin Sexton too, because both are killers in that front court.
Who do you like more out of that duo?
I will go with Darius Garland, but I mean, Colin's one of the few guys at his age that'll give you 24 on great efficiency. Yeah. Colin can get buckets. Darius Garland, for me, he's just got a great offensive game. Just getting to the rack, everything in the paint. Like, he's a fantastic finisher, and for his size, it's pretty rare, but he could get downhill. His speed is unparalleled. Like, he's one of the quickest, fastest twitch players in the NBA. So him getting from that three-point line to the basket, it happens in a matter of seconds. And it's like no center, not Embiid, not Bam, can check him out at the top of the key or switching. And he can shoot the three ball. His passing game is phenomenal. So I like Garland. OG Anunoby, I know you know OG because he's –
That's the guy I had on my list as well.
Toronto gets to go back to Toronto in front of their home crowd. That was a huge reason as to why Toronto underperformed, plus the Kyle Lowry stuff going on. But OG and the role he's going to play this season, I think will have fantastic odds to win Most Improved Player of the Year.
I got a side question for you about the Raptors. Do you think that they compete for the eighth – well, not the eighth seed. Do you think they compete, try to get it – do you see them in the playoffs this year?
Toronto makes the playoffs. Toronto makes the playoffs for sure. I think so. Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, a deep rotation. You got Gary Trent there, still Nick Nurse coaching there. I just think Toronto's too good to not make the playoffs, and I think last year was an anomaly season. So as competitive as the East is, you think there's like off the top of your head 6-8 teams that are good enough to make the playoffs. I do think Toronto is a playoff team. OG, I think, has great odds to win Most Improved Player of the Year. SGA out in OKC, of course, is going to have an awesome season. There's so many good young hoopers, but my pick for Most Improved Player of the Year is Kevin Porter Jr. That's my guy. I got to stand on that. KPJ out in Houston, he's a killer. We throw that word around, but when you talk killer, they don't make him like KPJ. Like, I'm talking, does not care who he's playing, doesn't care who's checking him, if the game's nationally televised or not. He's trying to cross you up, put you on a poster, break your ankles, do whatever he's got to do to get a bucket. And he does it at such a high rate. Like, you look at some of the best bucket getters unassisted, just individual production, taking the ball and scoring. KPJ's atop that list. And there's guys like Luka, Jason Tatum, James Harden that are usually on that list. So for KPJ to be in that company, such limited work with Cleveland, a bad situation, and a short stint with Houston, I think he's going to break out as a legitimate star in the NBA.
I love that pick because you really got to see him blossom in Houston. I'm not really sure. I heard there was like locker room issues in Cleveland, but Houston really got him for close to nothing in reality.
Literally.
And that's the steal of a lifetime. And then you pair him with a guy like Jalen Green, and they just get to grow together. And they're both dogs. They both get buckets. Michael Porter Jr. is another one in the conversation for me, but it just depends how much, you feel that he improved in reality because he was already at a pretty good spot. I mentioned RJ Barrett earlier. He's another guy that could get into the combo. I've seen Keldon Johnson floating around for San Antonio. And then, and maybe this is my bias kicking in. Part of me feels like Tyrese Maxey could make a huge jump. And, it all so much plays into that. If they end up trading Ben, they get somebody that will start at point guard that will take from Tyrese Maxey.
You got to lay off that regardless, bro. Give your lungs a break. Not getting king palms, unfiltered or filtered.
Yo, this is my man's here. I really fuck with him on another level right now. He said, "Peace out, gonna catch the Lakers and Warriors." But yeah, Tyrese Maxey is another guy I had on that list. But that's very dependent. I definitely love your picks though. The last one, this is it. I'm gonna get you out of here. It's time for bed.
It's time for bed. You're right.
Sixth man of the year. Any thoughts on that award this year?
I gotta go Derrick Rose. I gotta hope my guy wins sixth man of the year. That's really a perfect situation for Derrick Rose. They have 2 point guards out in New York. Kemba Walker is going to handle all of the starting point guard responsibility. Emmanuel quickly, sure, is going to be under D Rose's wing. But New York's a really good team, and they're really deep. So I think if Derrick Rose plays 18, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, starts a couple of games here and there, he can really win sixth man of the year. Other names, Nickeil Alexander-Walker out in New Orleans can have an underratedly big season and be propelled up to that six-man role, potentially even start. But who you rocking with for six man?
So the first one that came to mind for me was honestly Tyler Hero in Miami coming off the bench.
Okay.
In less of a role, less of that point guard role, more of his original role from his rookie season, where he can just come in and score. Like he doesn't need to go out there running offense. He can just come in and do what he's best at. There's obvious ones like Jordan Clarkson that I had on there. I doubt he repeats, though. Very, very seldom do you see awards repeat like that. Kevin Huerter from Atlanta is another guy I really like. Derrick Rose was on my list. He was at the top of my list, so you took that one right from me. But Derrick Rose and Tyler Hero are probably my two most notable competitors for that award. But what I'll say is I did this last year, and it never plays out like you think it would.
Never.
It never does,
Never.
but it is fun to talk about it. It's fun to just look at the season as a whole, predict where these guys are going, what their game's going to do this year. And there was nobody better that I could have selected to do it with. So I appreciate you coming on the show, Brock.
I appreciate you having me as always, bro.
Of course, bro. Let my audience know. I know mostly everybody's probably asleep by now. Let them know where they can find you whenever they watch this tomorrow, watch it next week, whatever the case may be. What you got going on, Brock?
Twitter is Landis Brock. You'll see it at the bottom of the screen at Landis Brock, LandesBrock. That's on Twitter. On YouTube, it's just Brock Landis, other way around. You'll be able to see my videos, everything, if you look me up. But I'm going to be working with Scotty all season. That's my guy right here. So as always, bro, it's all love. I appreciate you having me on, and keep killing it, dog. You got that Manscaped thing going on for you, bro. I'm gonna have to use that discount code, but keep killing it, bro. Let's go to the moon this season.
Hey, bro, and I got some gear. Whenever it comes around, whenever you just want to start playing right, we got T-shirts and stuff.
Okay.
So we got merch on the way, right? We gotta wait for the Eagles. We didn't even talk about the Birds. We don't need to talk about it tonight, but they got some work to do. But yeah, definitely appreciate you, bro. Great point. I want to shout out Manscaped one more time. Make sure to use that code DSM at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. Brock, once again, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. As you said, we will be linking up throughout the season. Maybe we got to pick less topics. That way we don't take up everybody tonight.
It won't matter.
Maybe we can really get in. We'll just find more, I swear. But love talking to you. You got a beautiful basketball mind, and always appreciative of you, bro. That's going to be it for us tonight, guys. Make sure you're following DSM Media at DSM_media on Twitter. You go on Twitter, you follow us there, you're going to find our link tree. It's going to have us covered on every social media, podcast, platforms across the board. And then make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube page, as I do got a nice giveaway going on. Anybody that decides to subscribe to DSM Media, I will enter you into a raffle for a Joel Embiid jersey of your choice. So we'll get that kicked off. We got several giveaways going on throughout the season, so make sure to keep your eyes open for that. That is going to be it for this episode, guys. Peace.